Hi everybody, it's me, Tasha Sharuna, your resident art historian with my lovely and beautiful sister, Nicole Sharuna, the art theorist. Okay, so today we're talking about formalism. Nicole, did you know that one of the fiercest and earliest advocates, the music critic Eduard Hanslick, was so despised by Richard Wagner that Wagner supposedly caricatured him in the Meistersinger as a petty, rule-obsessed critic Beckmesser, a whole operatic villain, just for saying music should be about music.
I don't know the specifics of it, but I knew he got petty about art critic.
Just Wagner.
Yeah.
And Wagner is the Rise of the Valkyries.
He is the drama.
The biography and background of Hanslick and formalism. To understand formalism, we start not in a gallery, but in 19th century Viennese concert hall with Eduard Hanslick. He was the most powerful music critic of his age, and in 1854 he published a manifesto called On the Musically Beautiful. So, his core argument was radical for the time. Music is about nothing but itself. Its content is tonally moving forms. It doesn't tell stories or express specific emotions. It's a pure abstract art. Nicole, hearing that as an art student, the idea that the artist's intention, the narrative, the historical context are all irrelevant and external factors, what is your gut reaction?
That is true, but only for the first time you encounter an art piece. Like, that's very important when you're experiencing something for the first time. Mm-hmm. And based on that experience, you will decide to engage with the artwork more or not. But the engagement will happen. The history, the context, everything surrounding the creation and the make and the reason around the art is of importance.
Okay, so then you're saying that that's the first step of enjoying an artwork, is being moved by its formal elements.
Sure. I wouldn't phrase it that way, but yeah.
Okay, so Hanslick, he championed composers like Brahms and savaged Wagner for adding drama and extra musical ideas. He was drawing a line. True art is self-sufficient. So now, Nicole, you're trained in autonomous art. How much of this Hanslickian spirit do you feel was embedded in the philosophy of your program? Were you encouraged to create self-sufficient worlds?
Yes. But also you need to make the decisions of the pieces that you make based on the history of the medium that you use, because the historical context of it is also important.
Yeah, so you're getting into the next episode, which is where we combine formalism and expressionism and all these theories together. So I'm going to give you 7 points of what formalism is, and I want you to, just interrupt me when you think I'm not saying anything clearly or whatever. So first he says...
Can you repeat that?
Sorry, continue. Please interrupt me. The essence of music is formal, not emotional. Hanslick argued that the content of music is nothing but totally moving forms. Music's beauty resides in its structure, melody, harmony, rhythm, not in any emotions it might evoke or represent. He famously stated that music has no subject matter beyond the notes themselves.
Music and art is there to move you. It invokes emotion within you. Mm-hmm. Like, even if you don't want it to evoke, it will, because it stimulates the senses, specifically with music, with what you hear. Like, it will happen regardless. Do you think there's art forms and there's specific artists that try to be as formalistic as possible? For example, Tool, which is math metal, which is very formal in how they approach in making music, but it still evokes emotion and feeling and has a concept and an idea behind it.
Yeah.
Most of it based on the formalistic elements of creating the sound, but it's not just that.
Yeah, and he's a critic, so he's not actually making this art.
Mm-hmm. So I would say the formalism elements that he mentions are used to create art. Each artist creates their own rule book or how to create works and what is important and what steps to follow.
Hanslick says no, because music is autonomous. Music is a self-contained art form that should be understood and judged on its own terms. It does not depend on or refer to anything outside of itself, not stories, emotions, nature, or moral ideas. This makes it the purest of the arts.
Sounds so stupid, actually, because, Greek tragedies, operas with ballet in it, or singing, they all tell stories.
Hanslick hates operas.
I love operas. Also, love me some Wagner. So I obviously don't like this man. Or we disagree in our artistic choices.
Yeah, because
in enjoyment.
Formalism is just a lens in how we can look at art, whether it's good art. Because with another sister, we looked at what's the difference between art theory and art critique. And he is creating this lens to how do I build that this is good art.
Yeah, okay, so they're trying to judge what makes art good.
Yeah, and he says it's not about the virality of it.
But we don't live in a vacuum. Nothing is created in a vacuum. Nothing is autonomous or stands aside from anything. Everything has an intersectionality where they come together.
Yeah, and that's what...
Yeah, that lacks that. This is such... It's not even... It's a one-sided coin. It has two sides, so...
Yeah, and this is the 19th century. We're looking at the old frameworks that still inform how a lot of people think we should think about art. So he also says, thirdly, that form and content are identical. In music, the form, the arrangement of sound, is the content. There is no separable message or story being conveyed. A Beethoven symphony is its structure of sound, not a narrative about struggle or triumph. So what you already said, like, what about tragedies?
That's bad art, or that's not music? Or there's no music in them necessarily?
Well, he says the more you have to add to it, the worse. Like, it's crutches, everything else. While music might stimulate feeling in the listener, it does not and cannot express specific nameable emotions like love, grief, or joy. The composer's emotions during creations are irrelevant to the musical work's value. Music can create a general, heightened aesthetic feeling, but it is not a language of emotion.
I agree with this in certain terms, because, for example, we were talking earlier about you trying to sell my art pieces or my photography based on our grandfather's glass house. And you have a very fixed own personal experience with this space. So when people are like, oh, this reminds me of this, you were like, actually, it's this.
Yes.
So that's a good example of like my intentions with the work is to form a connection with someone that's no longer there and building up a connection that might not have would have been possible in reality because our grandfather has passed away. But these other people always project their own experience onto it. So it doesn't matter how emotional or how much imbued family history there are into these pictures. Some people will only choose to engage with the photographs with their own projection onto photographs.
Yeah.
So it's purely just the form and what it invokes in them. Then you have other people that view art that wants to know more and is more interested in what lies behind it, because why do they like it? I want to know everything about it. You have these different elements about how people perceive art. So within this formalist setting that you've explained now, that does happen, and that is a very important part, but that's only the first layer.
Yeah.
You know, there's more to it. And if the artist decides to never evoke that the reason why they made this artwork was because they were grieving a death of a loved one, or a pet for that matter, if they decide to not share it with the public, then you can't interact with that, but you might still feel it within the work, or might completely not, because everybody has their own experiences and
lenses on which they view art.
Yeah. And experience anything visual or sound based.
Yeah, and so to get into the fifth point of Hanslick is that he had a lot of critique of program music like Wagner made. Hanslick championed absolute music, so instrumental music without a program or text, and was a fierce critic of composers like Wagner and Liszt, who wrote program music aimed at telling stories or painting pictures. He saw this as the corrupting music's pure abstract nature with extraneous non-musical elements.
Honestly, there's such an intense view and like forcing that up. Well, maybe it's just the imperialistic time and where you were able to have a very straight view.
He was an art critic, darling. Well, music critic. And then number 6, the arbitrary connection to extra musical. Any connections we make between a musical passage and an external idea like a storm, a battle, a feeling are subjective and arbitrary. True musical appreciation requires focusing solely on the internal relationship of the sound. Which sounds exhausting to me. Like, I'm not allowed to have my thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, people don't exist in a vacuum.
Yeah,
like, you can be transported through music and be completely sucked into the sound and the world that is being created visually. So music or even art can, transport you in that way.
In summary, Hanslick's formalism presents as an abstract, self-sufficient art whose meaning and value are found exclusively in its audible form, demanding an appreciation detached from emotion, narrative, or any external reference. So what I first want to say here is one of the biggest critiques against this was like, no, you can also use this lens to look at the visual art. The Netherlands has a lot of public art of this one artist from this period, the early 1900s, that is purely formalism because it changes every time you walk around it. And so that's also like formalism, that it's just purely about the artwork itself is the artwork because how the artwork looks or is or sculpted by its medium.
But the medium also has a history and a social political connotation to it. So like, once again, not in a vacuum. Like, that's the other question that I was going to pose. Like, does this art critic say that where you listen to the art, does that have an influence, or of how pure the art is. If it isn't played in a concert hall, but in the local tavern or whatever they had it
Or
in
the
1945,
subway, like they've done a few times.
yeah, does that take away from the pureness of that art?
Yeah.
But the way that you interact with that art is much different when you listen to it in a bar or you go to an auditorium where you sit and just listen to the music and there's nothing, well, there's
And
lots
pay
to do.
250 euros.
Yeah, to experience it. All these things have influence on how you experience it and how it gets valued.
Yeah.
I think what he's saying isn't possible. Like a lot of the things that he's saying to a certain point is like, yes, that does play a big role, but then purely being that and only that, even artists that try to work only on, once again, math metal tool, that it's more about the complexity of just the notes and the rhythms and stuff. You still have a visual album, a cover that you choose. It's still in a specific time that was brought out.
Yeah.
Like no matter how formalistically you approach making art, everything surrounding it affects the way that you view it and how you experience it.
Yeah. So we're going to go fast forward to early 20th century London. Two art critics, Clive Bell and Roger Fry, take this idea of formalism and runs with it. And they try to defend post-impressionistic paintings. They coined the term significant form. They argued that all true art shares is a powerful arrangement of lines, colors, and shapes that provoke an aesthetic emotion. The subject is irrelevant. You would be moved by a Cézanne still life or an African mask without knowing its cultural context.
So at least there's emotions attached to this time. It's allowed to produce.
Yeah, so here they do say you would appreciate an African mask, whether you know what ceremonies it's used for, or if it's reproduced in He Who Will Not Be Named, or stolen in his artworks.
Or painted into Western artworks, yes.
That you would still appreciate the lines and the forms outside of the context because it is the significant form of the lines and the colors is perfect. Bell and Fry, they said that you do get an emotional experience from and almost a glimpse of a higher reality when you look at an artwork that has significant form. That's formal elements are beautiful. That they say it's not a cold theory or like you just now said, it's almost like rigidity in it when Hanslick said it. It's formalism with a mystical heart. But here's a practical question from an art historian to an artist. How do you, in the studio, negotiate between this formal, autonomous quality and the inevitable content, ideas, references, or personal impulses that also want to enter the work? Is it a battle or a collaboration?
Well, sometimes it's definitely a battle. But it's mostly a collaboration because obviously in the mediums you choose, the colors that you choose can have a significant influence just by your own preference, but you can also specifically choose them because of the historical and political or cultural background that it has.
Yeah, because if you choose like plastic resin to make a sculpture compared to Carrara marble, it's saying something. It's impacting the way.
The medium that you choose does have a message, like social, political, cultural, historical message attached to it, and that also is very loaded within your work.
Yeah.
Even if you choose to ignore it, it's still there.
Yeah.
Like if you decide to crochet a piece of artwork and you don't know the history of crochet, people will look at it from different perspectives. People will see it as women's work, and some will see it with a rich cultural history that's attached to it over multiple cultures.
And some people will just remember it as that one trend in 2016 where everyone
where they crochet bombed everything.
Yeah. So let's quickly start defending formalism here. Yeah, let's defend it.
You can defend it.
Where does formalism as a lens get it absolutely right? What is its indispensable contribution to how we make and look art?
I think maybe a good summary for this is that formalism is a lens, and a lens we use to help understand the world, just like you have like Plato or other like philosophers and stuff. They look at the world from a very specific perspective. And with formalism, I think it still plays a very big role, and it really informs a lot of people's decisions on how they look at art or how they decide something's good art based on these concepts, maybe not purely as it was in 1845, sorry. But they use that as absolute truth instead of being like, this is a lens that you can look at something from, a perspective, because you can also look at stuff from a post-colonial perspective, or colonial, or an imperial, or in more intersectional perspective. This is only a lens, but this specific lens, it's important to really emphasize that this is not the be-all, end-all. It's only a way of looking at something. And that, I think, gets lost over history, especially because art critics write about stuff, and you only remember what has been written about.
Yeah.
Like without the written record or the visual record or even the posters for the exhibition being archived, how are you supposed to know that they existed in the past?
Yeah, because what I also didn't get into by Bell and Fry is that I feel the way they talked about formalism was, this is the significant form and you should love it because it's amazing. but they were a group of writers and artists, and I can't remember the group's name, but they literally, their whole thing was like, oh, we're bringing Post-Impressionists to the UK, and they didn't get like a warm response, but they literally like emotionally bullied people into loving Post-Impressionism. Like they were just like, oh, you haven't heard of this? You idiot. Like,
Yeah, but they're playing on insecurities and snobbery and classism. Yeah, so it was just a very elaborate
marketing.
Yeah, but also sounds a little bit con artisty. I'll tell you this is good art. Who gets to decide what's good?
And they all met at Cambridge. They were all in cahoots. So that was something that I didn't like context-wise. And even though formalism should just go about, you know, the inherent artwork,
which is the social, political, and cultural background of the time, played a very important role in how they formulated this new version of formalism for their own gain. Yes, but if we get what I would say down to what art is and what makes art good, is it inciting an emotion or a feeling within you. Because literally, if it's an artist on the street corner that has an art piece that moves you, how difficult is it to find art pieces that really stays with you and stays in the back of your mind? And like, you can't stop thinking about that. That's what makes art good.
Yeah.
But every person has a different background and projection of what they've experienced onto what they see. So there will be different variations of what people think are good or not, or what people enjoy or don't enjoy. But I think art should come down to the appreciation of art is like, did you enjoy it or not? Regardless of what other people say or feel, that's what it should come down to.
Yeah, but that's also such an easy way. It's like, you should just be moved by art. What are the different lenses we can give words to our feelings, to our experiences? I want to get into the critique and counter arguments. The philosopher like Brambusche are really brutal. He calls Bell and Fry's theory of tautology a circle argument. Art is significant form, which we know because it moves us, and it moves us because it has significant form. It's a closed loop. But I feel like a lot of the art world is a closed loop. Like, you know, an artist sells a lot, so a museum has to buy it. And because a museum buys it, it sells more. And because it sells more, another museum buys it.
Yeah, but that's just capitalism.
Yeah, but it's a closed loop in the art world. But
definitely is.
And how do you grapple as an art theorist?
I have so much opinions and thoughts on this. But yeah, it's a very much a closed loop. And sometimes there's a small opening if you've networked enough, or in the right place at the right time, or the right people know what you're working on, that you by some miracle fit into the concept of this new exhibition, that or you won a prize, then people are like, oh, what is this work about? What it comes down to, if people aren't aware of what you're making, they can't include you into future exhibitions. But how do you become visible if the loop is closed? You, like most artists or starting artists or just graduated, you organize your own art shows. You spend countless time and effort and unpaid labor writing project proposals to get the money to get seen, and then hopefully someone sees you and then you can get into the new loop.
Yeah, but as someone that has been selling art, the way Bell and Fry sell art is literally shaming people into buying art.
I think that still happens.
No, it definitely still happens, because I know the other major critique is that it's impossible to fully separate form from content, especially now. Like, it's also, you said that it's almost impossible. For instance, consider an artwork where the medium or formal technique is historically or politically charged. A pure formalist reading would demand we ignore that resonance and look only at the lines and color. Does that feel like a responsible or complete way to engage with art that exists in our social world? And we already extrapolated on this.
No, not at all. Like, and there's context, there's history, there's cultural and social political, there's climate, political climate, where it was made or not made. Like, all of this plays a role into it.
Yeah, so you can't really truly actually see art just art pour l'art.
Well, no, but you can, your first impression is always just what the art is. So that does play a role. Like, that is what pulls you in, that puts you off into hating something or loving something or being confused by something, is the art just being its art. And you can choose to engage with it or not. Most people don't necessarily choose to engage with art, but maybe one art piece in the whole museum, they're like, I need to know more about this piece. So it's important what art looks like and how you read it and what you see, because that has that is your first impression.
Okay, so we will say then the good thing about formalism, or understanding art through formalism, is that it's like the first handshake, the good impression.
But like, I do think, because this is so extreme, like the first one and the second two being so problematic, is that I come from Conceptual Art Academy. Like, they literally forced us, because of the spaces and the lack of studio spaces, to come up with more conceptual art. So for me, a lot of the art pieces I made are ideas. They never come into fruition because the idea is so good. But if you don't have time, if you then have to be forced to make your good idea into art, you didn't have time to visually experience or experiment with the visual side, so they might not weigh up. And I've seen that a lot since 2014. A lot of the exhibitions I've seen over that 10-year course after that is all being very conceptual, and nothing pulls you in. You go to the artwork and it's like, this is terrible. This is like really, really mundane. And then I force myself to go read what it's about, and then you're so fascinated, so grappled, and then you understand why visually it looks like that. But also at the same time, that could also make it inaccessible to a lot of people. So it's also, who are you creating art for?
Yeah, that you say like, okay, we build and then only I add, because that's also how you write an academic test. You take in all the information, put it through a lens, and see if you can build a little bit further. It's never just like, oh, I just create something out of nothing.
Well thought out, lots of theory, the history, the context, the intersection, everything is there. It's an amazing idea. Just presenting the idea itself is the artwork by itself. And sometimes you do have to present the artwork. So you either have to create it or present it as an idea, and that's a decision you make. I just made it like the way it looked. Yes, but you can't, that's okay, but you don't say that part out loud. Well, you can, but like, what about the rest of it? And then, I don't know, I like this one mask and I made it. And it's like, okay, you're at an academy where you're trying to learn more. Yeah. Students, obviously, I think philosophers and lots of different studies go through this, where they get introduced to an old idea, maybe like formalism, and then their mind is completely blown, and then they don't necessarily develop from that. They don't grow with that idea or through history. So they keep making the same work, and then the work becomes ignorance because there's been 200 years of development since that one idea. It's like some people get really fixated on Nietzsche and only make work based on what they read about that, which is also not necessarily a full interpretation.
I think it's very interesting that you're saying, because this was my question, and thank you for explaining that to me. I want to ask the listeners now. For you, our listeners, Nicole's been wrestling, now we're here with this. Is formalism, the idea that we should judge art only by its form, still a relevant ideal, or is it a nostalgic relic? Can you or should you separate the brushstroke from the biography, the composition from the context? We want to know. So please send us an email at the Sciarone Salon @gmail.com. The T-H-E, Sciarone, S-C-I-A-R-O-N-E, Salon, S-A-L-O-N, @gmail.com with your thoughts, and we'll read a selection in our final episode.